Hey guys! So today you and I are going to talk about displeasure and disdain. So let's get into it. So the question in question was, hi Frederick, if you believe a product is destined to fail and contains unnecessary features, how would you express your displeasure and disdain to the tech executives and founders? Well, I would do the thing that I usually do. Not the thing I used to do, because that never turned out all that well for me, which is to just talk about my experiences and explain all the logical reasons why this is destined to fail and so forth, because nobody gives a shit, guys. I swear. No one none of the executive CTOs or startup founders or ever anything like that, nobody is going to listen to you usually when you say things like that, unless you're like a personal friend or someone with a connection with them, because that's literally the thing that the whole startup, if it's a startup thing, that's what it's all about. For a startup, it's usually the case that you're trying to defy the trends. You're trying to be a disruptor, as they like to call them, and they make that stupid gesture that the unicorns make. That you're trying to prove that this thing can float and so forth, and no one in their right mind would try to do that if they didn't have at least a little bit of confidence in their own ability to deliver something. Anybody who started a small business and done anything risky in their life are going to be told 100 times over that, oh, this is a mistake, well, what about this, what about that. All the people who go to art college or so forth and so forth, they're probably hearing that as well. So you're probably not going to get so far with just saying that, oh, this is an unnecessary feature, or like this is a bad product and so forth. The thing that I usually do nowadays is that I try to approach it from a perspective where I simply present the facts and I let that be the end of the story. So to broaden that a little bit, one of the things that I do, and I have done in recent time, was to start trying to make people understand that something is unsustainable by simply pointing out, for example, that, well, the cost of this project is this amount, but the amount of people who are using the feature or so forth and so forth, they're actually that it's almost nobody, basically. And that's the key thing. You've heard me say this before, guys, that people say that they're quote-unquote data-driven in IT. That's absolute bullshit. Most of them are gut feeling driven. And so the thing that I usually try to do when I have a role where it is important for me to be able to persuade people, or to actually be the sort of person who can be persuasive for the good of my organization or the company that I'm working with or so forth, is to basically go and do the thing that the POs are doing or so forth and so forth, or founders usually in a startup, they will never listen, in essence. I've never had that experience, at the very least. Corporate executives and so forth, it's a different situation there, because the corporate executives, most of them don't really care if they're wasting money or they're building on unnecessary stuff, because it's not their money. That's the important thing to understand, guys. The reason why your PO doesn't highlight that you're over budget or all of this stuff is because their job is in the balance. If they lose this project, or in some cases it's just pure old incompetence, but guys, there are more useless systems than useful systems. If you look at the landscape of IT and so forth, where the entire thing is just there and it costs insane amount of money, because people have their livelihood attached to the fact that this thing is working and so forth. And if you've ever tried to be one of those people who try to optimize things and do the thing quote unquote that is right by the company, you will see very quickly that that works sometimes, and in many cases you're going to find a brick wall. And there's no you will present rational, reasonable, logical statements to these people, and they won't care, because it's not about logic and rational thinking and proof and facts and stuff like that. It's about something else usually, when you don't get through to people. And so what I do in those such situations is the thing that I've found to work the best, which is, as I said, to basically make a point out of highlighting the things that I know will sound really weird to someone who is more powerful than the person that is responsible. Because the thing is, guys, as I said, you cannot usually convince a person whose job it is, because most of them care more about their job than, you know, whether or not it's costing too much money or like things like that. And so they won't, if you just come and say, yeah, this is bad and we should be doing things in a better way, they usually won't act upon it. There's nothing that's going to come from it. But if you can get a hold of the people who are actually in charge, or who has, you know, in a sense, who are themselves responsible, like where, if you take me as an example, if I am your manager or like your technical product owner or something like that, I might not be so interested in hearing that this is a useless project, because I probably won't care. But on the other hand, if I'm the head of the department or something like that, where literally it's sort of my job to make sure that, you know, everything is being done correctly, or I'm in charge of making sure that, you know, everybody gets heard. I have a more human focused role, where it's more important for my career, not necessarily that the company is making money, but that people are being heard. There you have an in. Now, if you go to your stakeholders or your founders or so forth in a small startup, as I said, you're pretty much fresh out of luck, because they are all invested in the system. And as I said, it's very rare to find people who are rationally thinking when they're invested into something in an emotional fashion, or like it's a survival thing usually. But the people who are more disconnected, where it doesn't really matter how things go, they are more usually open to hearing things and listening to you. And so what you do, or rather what I do, is that I go and I take a look at, you know, and a classic one is, how, if you take this is my favorite one actually, internal systems. So most of the internal initiatives in especially in large corporations, are actually a hidden cost that a lot of people don't think about. If you take a look at, like, if you look at the development cost, the salaries of all the developers, and you look at like infrastructure and third-party services and all the things that people are spending money on in order to deliver some type of internal system, and then you look at what that thing does, and you realize that that thing is basically just a dashboard. You could literally do, like, there's like, you're literally you're employing an entire development department for something that is literally like a visualization of some data and a button. Now, how do you make the people that you work with realize that this is idiotic? Well, as I said, they're probably not the best audience. But if you can go and show that you're not actually tracking how many users you have, because 99% of the systems that you work with, they don't track that for some reason, which should probably be something fairly important. So you should probably start tracking that, or you make the pitch. Maybe we need to evaluate that, you know, we have a whole development team doing something for an audience that we don't even know how many people are in that audience. We don't even know how many people are using the system. Maybe we should get some basic understanding of how much value this is bringing. That's a conversation you can have with someone whose future is not depending on that this thing works. Because, as I said, they are much harder to convince with rational arguments due to the fact that it's an emotional thing. And you're probably not going to win that battle. But find someone who is more invested in whether or not something is useful or not, then, you know, their survival isn't depending on this thing, and you're more likely to find a willing audience. So what I want you to take away from this is that the way that I tell people that I'm not happy with a feature, or like I feel like a system is bad or so forth, is I just explain in rational terms that here are my reasons as to why I think that this is, like, there's a cheaper alternative, or there's a better solution, or so forth and so forth, and then that is promoted and conveyed to people where I actually have a damn shot to be heard out. I promise you guys, you will find a ton of startups that basically just go bankrupt due to the fact, as I said, like, they might have an unsustainable business model, but that doesn't matter to the founders, because the founders have literally this is their, like, they literally invest their entire lives into this thing in many cases. I'm not saying always, but it's the same thing like a small business owner. It's not that many people who can just step back and say, this thing that I'm trying so hard to make happen and that's really important to me is really a dumb idea. A lot of people won't hear that sort of rhetoric if you try to push it on them. But if you do have someone who either has a good in with these people, or at least someone who has, as I said, a stake in the thing, that the thing goes well, but at the same time stands more to lose if, you know, people are like basically pissing away money for them, that's a more willing audience. So go to not your PO, go to your PO's manager or your department head, or someone who has a safe revenue stream, who's not going to be frightened by the fact that this thing isn't going so well, because they can basically pull the plug on it and it doesn't matter to them. That's the person you want to reach, and you want to reach them and by telling them that, well, we're actually doing a lot of these things, but there's probably a lot of waste going on. You want them to be curious about whether or not this thing has a value at all, and start asking some tricky questions. The best thing that can happen is that they ask you to sort of help them out with this sort of thing and make an evaluation. And the second best thing is that they try to figure out from their from your PO or whoever is like the stakeholders or the founders of the company, whatever, what are you doing? And if you're lucky, they won't really have a good answer, and the person who's asking the question will be really not all that convinced by whatever they're saying. And if you're unlucky, they will be incompetent or ignorant of how to evaluate if this thing is working or not. And as I said, guys, a lot of companies are just pissing away money on like backing new startups or like different ventures and so forth, and they don't really care if the thing works or not. It's just another project for them. And in situations like that, you can't do anything. You might have the best ideas and like you foresee everything and so forth. And I give you this tip: when you feel like nobody is listening, like not even the people who sort of should be interested in that the thing goes well, just treat it as being on the Titanic. Tell everybody that there's an iceberg coming. And when nobody listens to you, don't try to force them, because what they're going to do is they're going to put you in the boat with them, and you're just going to make them hate you. Go and sit yourself down, put in one of the the lifeboats, and put on your own float, your own safety harnesses and all of this good stuff, right? Just make sure that you do that, because you're not going to stop the Titanic from hitting the iceberg, but at the very least you don't have to go down with the ship. Have a great day.